My name is Melody. I'm 32 years old, and 3 days after I buried my husband, his mother tried to throw me out of my own home. She stood in my living room, waving a handwritten note she claimed was his real will, screaming that everything belonged to her now. What she didn't know is that I had just left the lawyer's office, and the document in my purse was about to change everything. If you've ever been underestimated by people who thought you were weak, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you've dealt with family who showed their true colors when money was involved. Trust me, what happened next will leave you speechless. Chen and I met 7 years ago at a hospital fundraiser. I was a pediatric nurse working the overnight shift, exhausted but determined to support the charity event during my break. He was there representing his family's real estate development company, looking sharp in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When the keynote speaker's microphone failed, Marcus jumped up without hesitation and delivered an impromptu speech about community healthcare that had everyone in tears. That's who he was. Confident, compassionate, never afraid to step up when others hesitated. After his speech, he found me by the dessert table. I was stress-eating chocolate cake, still wearing my scrubs because I'd come straight from a 12-hour shift. "You're Melody Reeves," he said, not asked. "You saved my nephew's life last month." Pneumonia, right? Turned out his sister's 6-year-old son had been one of my patients. Marcus had been there during visiting hours, watching me work, and apparently he'd been trying to find a way to thank me ever since. We talked for 3 hours that night. He insisted on walking me to my car even though it meant missing the rest of the gala. 6 months later, we were engaged. His family's reaction to our relationship was complicated from the start. The Chens were what you'd call old money. Marcus's great-grandfather had immigrated from Taiwan in the 1950s, worked as a janitor while teaching himself real estate law at night, and eventually built a property empire that now spanned 3 states. The family business, Chen Development Corporation, was worth an estimated $40 million. Marcus's mother, Patricia Chen, had very specific ideas about who her only son should marry. And a middle-class nurse from Ohio with student loan debt was definitely not on her approved list. Our engagement dinner at the Chen family estate was a masterclass in passive aggression. Patricia spent the entire evening pointing out everything I lacked. No family connections, no business acumen, no understanding of their world. She actually said to Marcus, right in front of me, "Surely you could find someone more suitable. Someone who understands what it means to be a Chen." Marcus's younger brother, Derek, was even worse. He pulled Marcus aside, loud enough for me to hear, and warned him about gold diggers who target wealthy men. The only family member who showed me genuine warmth was Marcus's grandmother, Liane, a tiny woman in her 80s who had survived the Cultural Revolution and immigrated with nothing but determination. She took my hand at dinner and said quietly in Mandarin, which she didn't know I understood from my college minor, "This one has a strong heart. That matters more than a strong wallet." Despite his family's disapproval, Marcus and I got married in a small ceremony. His mother refused to attend, calling it a mistake she couldn't support. His father came but left immediately after the vows. Only grandmother Liane stayed for the reception, dancing with Marcus and telling me stories about the family's humble beginnings. For 5 years, our marriage was everything I dreamed of and more. Marcus worked long hours at the company, groomed to eventually take over from his father, but he always made time for us. Weekend hiking trips, cooking disasters in our kitchen, late-night conversations about the future we wanted to build together. We talked about having children, maybe 2 or 3. We fantasized about traveling the world. We were genuinely happy in a way that felt rare and precious. His family remained distant. Patricia would call Marcus weekly, always with some crisis that required his immediate attention, always finding ways to remind him that I wasn't good enough. Derek, who worked alongside Marcus at the company, constantly undermined me in subtle ways. Forgetting to include me in family events, making jokes about nurses being glorified waitresses, questioning whether I actually loved Marcus or just his bank account. Subscribe now so you don't miss what happened when they finally showed who they really were. Then came the accident. Marcus was driving home from a late business meeting on a Tuesday night. A drunk driver ran a red light at 60 miles per hour. The impact killed Marcus instantly. The police said he never saw it coming, that he didn't suffer. I'm not sure if that made it better or worse. One moment, I had a husband, a partner, a future. The next moment, I had nothing but an empty house and a grief so profound I couldn't breathe. The funeral was a blur. I remember standing beside the casket in a black dress I'd bought the day before because I'd never needed funeral clothes. I was 32 years old and burying my husband. Nothing about that felt real. Patricia Chen orchestrated the entire service without consulting me once. She chose the flowers, the music, even the eulogy speakers. When I suggested including a reading Marcus had loved, she cut me off. "We know what's appropriate for a Chen family funeral, dear." The implication was clear. I didn't. Hundreds of people attended. Business associates, family friends, distant relatives I'd never met. They all lined up to offer condolences to Patricia and Derek while I stood off to the side, the grieving widow who somehow felt like an outsider at her own husband's funeral. Only grandmother Lian sat beside me, holding my hand with surprising strength for someone so frail. After the burial, after the reception, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in the house Marcus and I had bought together. Every corner held memories. The kitchen where he'd burned toast every Sunday morning. The living room where we'd watched terrible reality TV and argued playfully about who had worse taste. The bedroom where I'd fallen asleep in his arms just 6 nights ago, completely unaware it would be the last time. The next morning, I received a call from Patricia. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't offer support or comfort. She simply stated that she'd be coming by at 2 o'clock to discuss arrangements. Her tone made it clear this wasn't a request. When she arrived, she wasn't alone. Derek was with her, along with a man she introduced as Warren Fitzpatrick, the family's personal attorney. They walked into my home like they owned it, which I suppose they thought they did. "Melody," Patricia began, settling onto my couch without being invited to sit. "We need to talk about your situation." "My situation," I repeated, still foggy with grief and confusion. Derek jumped in, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "This house, the cars, Marcus's accounts. Obviously, those need to be returned to the family now." I felt like I'd been slapped. Returned? Marcus was my husband. Everything we had, we built together. Patricia's expression hardened. "Marcus was a Chen before he was your husband. The family assets need to stay within the family. The real family." The lawyer, Fitzpatrick, opened his briefcase and produced several documents. "Mrs. Chen, I've reviewed Marcus's financial holdings. While you were married, the bulk of his wealth remained in family trusts and corporate shares. Your name doesn't appear on most of these assets." My stomach dropped. Marcus had always handled our finances. I worked full-time as a nurse, contributing my salary to household expenses, but Marcus had inherited significant wealth that he managed separately. I'd never questioned it, never thought to protect myself, because I trusted him completely. We trusted each other. Furthermore, Fitzpatrick continued, "There's the matter of the prenuptial agreement you signed before the wedding." "Prenuptial agreement?" I shook my head. "We never signed a prenup." Marcus said he didn't believe in them. Derek pulled out a folder and slid it across the coffee table. "Your signature is right there, Melody," along with witnesses and a notary stamp. I picked up the document with shaking hands. The signature did look like mine, but I had absolutely no memory of signing this. The date was 2 weeks before our wedding. According to this prenup, I was entitled to nothing in the event of Marcus's death. No inheritance, no property, no claim to any Chen family assets. "You're lying," I whispered. "This is fake. I never signed this." Patricia stood, brushing invisible lint from her designer skirt. "Whether you remember or not is irrelevant. The document is legal and binding. You have 2 weeks to vacate this property." 2 weeks? This is my home. "It's Marcus's home," Patricia corrected coldly. "And Marcus is gone. The house was purchased primarily with family money. It reverts to the estate." I looked to the lawyer, desperate. Mr. Fitzpatrick, surely there are laws protecting spouses. Community property rights, something? He avoided my eyes. In your prenuptial agreement, you waived those rights. I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen, but legally speaking, you have very little standing here. They left shortly after, but not before Patricia delivered one final blow. I never understood what Marcus saw in you, she said from my doorway. You brought nothing to this marriage except problems. At least now you can go back to your old life and stop pretending to be something you're not. After they left, I collapsed on the floor and sobbed until my ribs ached. Not just from grief over losing Marcus, but from the humiliation of being dismissed so completely. Of being erased from the life we'd built together. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation, the documents, Patricia's cruel words. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I would not go down without a fight. If that prenup was real, I needed to know. And if it wasn't, I needed proof. At 8 in the morning, I called the law firm that had handled our estate planning when Marcus and I bought the house. I was transferred 3 times before finally reaching Marcus's actual attorney, a woman named Vanessa Park. Ms. Park, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I'm Melody Chen, Marcus's widow. I need to see his will immediately. There was a pause. Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry for your loss. I actually have you scheduled for an appointment this afternoon. Marcus left very specific instructions that you were to meet with me alone within 1 week of his death. My heart began to race. He did? Yes, she said gently. He updated everything 6 months ago. Can you come in at 2? I'll explain everything then. I hung up, my mind spinning. 6 months ago. What had Marcus known 6 months ago? What had he done? The hours until my appointment crawled by with agonizing slowness. I couldn't eat. Couldn't focus. I kept staring at the prenup Patricia had shown me, studying the signature that looked like mine but felt wrong somehow. At exactly 2 o'clock, I walked into Vanessa Park's office. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. Mrs. Chen, she said, gesturing for me to sit, thank you for coming. I know this must be an incredibly difficult time. She pulled out a thick folder. 6 months ago, Marcus came to see me. He was concerned about his family's intentions, particularly his mother's and brother's behavior toward you. He wanted to ensure that if anything happened to him, you would be protected. Protected? I leaned forward. What do you mean? Vanessa opened the folder, revealing multiple documents. Marcus created a comprehensive estate plan that supersedes any previous arrangements. He was very clear about his wishes. First, she slid a document toward me. This is Marcus's last will and testament, properly executed, witnessed, and notarized. Everything goes to you. The house, his personal accounts, his shares in the family company, everything except his trust fund, which had its own stipulations. I stared at the will, unable to process what I was reading. But his mother showed me a prenup that says I get nothing. Vanessa's expression darkened. May I see it? I pulled the document from my bag. She studied it for perhaps 30 seconds before setting it down. This is a forgery, she said bluntly. And not even a good one. The notary seal is from a company that went out of business 3 years before your wedding date. The witness signatures belong to people Marcus never met. Your signature appears to be digitally copied from another document and pasted here. My hands started shaking. So they faked it. They created a fake prenup to try to steal everything. Vanessa nodded grimly. Unfortunately, yes. But here's what they didn't know. Marcus anticipated this. He came to me 6 months ago after Derek suggested to him that the family should require you to sign a postnuptial agreement, essentially trying to strip away your spousal rights after the fact. Marcus refused, and that conversation made him realize how far his family might go. She pulled out more documents. He did several things to protect you. First, he transferred the house entirely into your name. It's yours free and clear, no matter what they claim. Second, he liquidated several personal investment accounts, about $3 million, and deposited them into an account solely in your name. Third, and this is the big one, he changed the beneficiary on his life insurance policy. A $10 million policy that his mother assumed would go to her. It goes to you. The room seemed to tilt. $10 million? But there's more, Vanessa continued. Marcus owned 20% of Chen Development Corporation through shares his grandmother gave him years ago. According to the company bylaws, those shares can only be transferred to family members or sold back to the company at fair market value. As his widow, you're considered family. Those shares are now yours, worth approximately $8 million. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This had to be a mistake. You're saying I own 20% of his family's company? Exactly. And according to the corporate bylaws, any shareholder with more than 15% has voting rights on major decisions and a mandatory seat on the board of directors. Patricia Chen currently controls 30%. Derek has 25% through his father's gifts over the years. Marcus's father retired and transferred his shares to Patricia before he died. Other investors and partners hold the remaining 25%. What does that mean practically? I managed to ask. It means you have significant power, Vanessa said. You can block major decisions. You can demand financial transparency. You can vote against initiatives. Patricia and Derek can't make unilateral decisions anymore. They need your approval. Or they need to buy you out at market value, which they almost certainly can't afford. For the first time since Marcus died, I felt something other than grief and despair. I felt a spark of anger, of determination. They tried to steal everything from me. They're about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating people. Subscribe if you want to see what happened when I walked into that board meeting. Vanessa spent the next hour walking me through every detail of Marcus's estate plan. He had been meticulous, anticipating every possible way his family might try to cheat me. He'd even left me a letter, sealed and dated, explaining his reasoning. My dearest Melody, it began, and I had to stop reading through my tears. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry I couldn't stay with you longer. I know my family. I know how they operate. I've watched them bully and manipulate people my entire life. I won't let them do it to you. Everything I'm leaving you isn't just about money. It's about choices, freedom, the ability to live your life on your own terms without anyone having power over you. You gave me 7 years of genuine happiness. Let me give you this. The letter went on for 3 pages, detailing his hopes for my future, his regrets about his family, and his absolute certainty that I deserved everything he was leaving me. Don't let them make you feel guilty, he wrote. Don't let them convince you that you don't deserve this. You earned every bit of it by loving me when I wasn't a Chen, when I was just Marcus. That's worth more than all the money in the world. I left Vanessa's office with copies of every document, legally certified and impossible to dispute. The prenup Patricia had shown me was going in the trash. The real will was going in my safe. And tomorrow, I was going to pay the Chen family a visit they would never forget. That night, I barely slept again, but this time it wasn't from grief. It was from planning. I thought about every cruel comment, every dismissive look, every moment they'd made me feel small and worthless. They'd underestimated me because I was a nurse, because I came from a regular family, because I didn't speak their language of power and manipulation. Tomorrow, they were going to discover their mistake. The next morning, I dressed carefully. A black suit Marcus had bought me for a charity gala, elegant and expensive. I styled my hair the way Patricia always wore hers, pulled back in a sleek bun. I wore the diamond earrings Marcus gave me on our first anniversary. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone different. Not a grieving widow to be pitted and dismissed. A woman who owned 20% of a $40 million company. At 10 o'clock, I walked into the Chen Development Corporation headquarters. The receptionist recognized me and her expression flickered with surprise and something that might have been pity. I'm here to see Patricia Chen, I said calmly. Do you have an appointment? She's in a board meeting right now. Perfect, I replied, walking past her desk toward the conference room. I'll join her. Mrs. Chen, wait, you can't just, but I was already opening the door. The conference room fell silent. Patricia sat at the head of a massive table, surrounded by Derek and 8 other executives I didn't recognize. They all turned to stare at me. Melody, Patricia said, her voice icy. This is a private meeting. You need to leave. I pulled out a folder and set it on the table. Actually, Patricia, according to Chen Development Corporation bylaws, Article 7, Section 3, any shareholder controlling more than 15% of the company has a mandatory seat on the board. I own 20%. This is my meeting too. The room erupted. Derek jumped to his feet. You don't own anything. Marcus's shares revert to the family. I pulled out the will, the real one, and slid it down the table toward Patricia. Marcus's last will and testament, properly executed, leaving his shares to me. You'll notice it's dated 6 months ago and was witnessed by 3 attorneys. It supersedes anything you might have created in the past few days. Patricia's face went white as she scanned the document. This can't be legal. She looked at Fitzpatrick, who had apparently been invited to this meeting. Warren, tell her this isn't legal. But Fitzpatrick was reviewing his own copy of the will, and his expression said everything. It's legitimate, he said quietly. I verified it this morning with the state records. Mrs. Chen is now the owner of Marcus's 20% stake in the company. No, duh. Rex shouted. She's a nobody. She can't control part of our family business. I turned to face him directly. I'm not a nobody, Derek. I'm a 20% shareholder, which means every major decision this company makes now requires my approval. Want to sell property? You need my vote. Want to take out loans? My approval. Want to distribute profits? I get my share. His face turned red with rage. We'll buy you out. Name your price. I smiled. $8 million. That's the market value of my shares based on the company's last valuation. Cash. Do you have $8 million in liquid assets, Derek? The silence told me everything. They didn't. The company had assets, but not that kind of cash sitting around. And I knew from Marcus's explanations of the business that they'd been leveraging properties for new developments. They were asset-rich but cash-poor. Patricia found her voice, though it shook with barely controlled fury. You won't get away with this. We'll fight it in court. We'll tie this up for years. Go ahead, I said calmly. In the meantime, I'll be attending every board meeting, reviewing every financial statement, and exercising my voting rights. I pulled out another document. Oh, and speaking of court, you might want to explain this. I held up the forged prenup. My attorney tells me that creating fraudulent legal documents and attempting to defraud a widow of her rightful inheritance is a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. Wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy. Patricia's confident mask cracked completely. You can't prove we made that. The notary seal is from a company that closed 3 years before my wedding date, I said. The witnesses are people Marcus never met. My signature was digitally copied from another document. Should I go on? Or would you like to drop this whole charade and accept that I'm not going anywhere? For a long moment, no one spoke. Then one of the other board members, an older gentleman I didn't recognize, cleared his throat. If I may, he said carefully, it seems Mrs. Chen has a legitimate claim to these shares. Perhaps we should discuss how to move forward productively rather than fight what appears to be a legal reality. Patricia shot him a look that could have melted steel. But slowly, reluctantly, she nodded. Fine, she said through clenched teeth. You want to play corporate games, Melody? You'll learn quickly that this world is more complicated than you imagine. Actually, I'm a quick learner. Now, where were we in the meeting agenda? The next hour was excruciating. They discussed property developments, profit margins, and zoning issues while barely acknowledging my presence. But I stayed. I took notes. I asked questions when I didn't understand something. And I made it clear that I wasn't intimidated. When the meeting finally ended, Derek cornered me in the hallway. You think you've won, he hissed. But you have no idea how to run a business. You'll make mistakes, and when you do, we'll force you out. Maybe, I replied calmly. Or maybe I'll learn. Either way, for now, I'm exactly where Marcus wanted me to be. Protected. Independent. And impossible for you to dismiss. Over the following weeks, I immersed myself in understanding the business. I hired my own financial advisor to explain the company's operations. I attended every meeting, read every report, and slowly began to understand the empire the Chen family had built. And the more I learned, the more problems I discovered. Derek had been making risky investments without proper oversight. Patricia had been using company funds for personal expenses and disguising them as business costs. The company wasn't failing, but it was being mismanaged in ways that could eventually lead to serious trouble. 3 months after Marcus's death, I called for a special board meeting. This time, I set the agenda. I presented evidence of the financial irregularities I'd discovered, backed by my advisor's analysis. I proposed new oversight measures, stricter financial controls, and an independent audit. The other board members, who had initially been skeptical of me, were now paying attention. They could see the problems too. Patricia tried to shut down the discussion, but I'd done my homework. I'd talked to each board member individually beforehand, explaining my concerns and building support. When the vote came, the new oversight measures passed. Patricia and Derek were furious, but they were outvoted. That night, Patricia called me. Her voice was different. Quieter. Almost defeated. "You've made your point, Melody. You're not as weak as I thought." "I never was weak, Patricia. You just never bothered to see me clearly." There was a long pause. "Marcus loved you," she said finally. I didn't want to believe it. "I thought you were after his money. But he knew. He knew I'd try to push you out, and he protected you anyway." "Because that's who he was," I said softly. "He saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it." Another pause. "I'm sorry," Patricia whispered. "For the funeral. For the prenup. For everything." "It's too late for sorry," I replied. "But it's not too late to be better. To honor Marcus's memory by actually being the family he wanted you to be." She didn't respond, just hung up quietly. I stood by the window of the house that was now truly mine, looking out at the city lights. Marcus was gone. That pain would never fully heal. But he'd left me something more valuable than money or shares in a company. He'd left me power. Agency. The ability to stand on my own and face down anyone who tried to make me small. A year has passed since Marcus's death. The company is doing better than ever under the new oversight structure. Derek actually apologized to me last month, admitting he'd been threatened by my presence because he knew he'd been cutting corners. Patricia and I aren't close, but we're civil. She respects me now, even if she doesn't like me. Grandmother Lien passed away peacefully in her sleep 6 months ago. Before she died, she took my hand and told me something I'll never forget. "Marcus chose well," she said in Mandarin. "You have the strong heart I saw that first night. Thank you for fighting for what was yours." I sold half my shares back to the company last month for $4 million. It was enough to feel secure, but still maintain influence over the business Marcus loved. I donated $1 million to the hospital where I used to work, funding a new pediatric wing in Marcus's name. The rest I invested carefully, following advice from professionals who respect my questions instead of dismissing them. I'm back to nursing part-time now, working with children, because that's what feeds my soul. The money gives me choices, but the work gives me purpose. That's the balance Marcus wanted for me. Not to be defined by wealth or status, but to have the freedom to choose my own path. Have you ever had people underestimate you because of who you are or where you came from? How did you prove them wrong? Drop a comment below sharing your story. If this resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences about fighting for what you deserve. Remember, being underestimated is just another form of surprise advantage. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it inspires you to stand firm when others try to push you down.